The following episode contains content that some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Hi, I'm Zoe,
And I'm Kaz,
and this is Tea, Crumpets and Horror.
a very British podcast.
Hello, and welcome to our very first episode of our podcast.
Alright, sassy.
So, just to give you a little bit of background, we are sisters,
Mm-hmm.
and we do live in the UK, or Britain,
Yep.
depending on what you like to call it, or your feelings about the Union.
I like to call it Bob.
And we live in a lovely town slash city slash dwelling on the coast somewhere. We're not going to tell you where exactly, but it will eventually become evident because we are going to probably talk about that place.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Please don't stalk us. We have no money. It's not a joke.
We really don't. So we decided that we were going to do our own podcast. I have to admit, I probably strong-armed Kaz into this a little bit.
You did a touch, and I know you like to say, "Oh, it's your fault because you made me listen to true
Yeah,
crime
you did.
podcasts." But it was better than listening to the same 4 songs over and over again and getting on
true.
each other's nerves.
Which is true, because we've just had to go through an epic lockdown in which we moved.
Yep. Then we did Lockdown 2.0.
Yeah, we're not really big TV watchers, are we? So
No.
it was a bit difficult for us to sort of find things to entertain ourselves in the evening. But we're here now. So, yeah, I guess get comfortable. And
I am comfortable.
I'm not.
Oh, just squeaky sofa.
So this podcast is not necessarily a true crime podcast. So if you're a bit worried that you're going to hear some of the same stories, you'd be right. But we have decided that we're going to focus on some of the weird and wonderful and not so lovely stories from the UK.
Yeah, and when we say the UK, we do mean Britain and our neighbours, our very close neighbours, Wales and Scotland, but also the various little islands that we are surrounded by, and also our neighbours in Northern Ireland and our very distant cousins who probably don't like us that much, but we still love them, the Republic of Ireland as well.
Did you also say that you wanted to do a story that came from
Hong Kong, yeah, British territory. I don't know how to say that without being like, it's a colony.
When we loaned it.
No, they loaned it to us.
Yeah, that's what I meant, sorry.
Yeah, when we borrowed Hong Kong for a bit. So,
just 100 years.
99 years.
99 years?
Yeah, it was 99 years.
How awkward.
Yeah, that's a bit awkward. I think that's how it works, though. So, yeah, maybe, yeah, some of those kind of like stories as well. And the idea is that like once a week, one of us will tell you a tale of mystery and intrigue. And we like to class them as either tea, crumpets, or horror. Yes. But obviously they can cover a range of things and a range of people and a range of areas and beliefs and everything, really.
Yeah, I think we've kind of gone for quite a broad spectrum. But what we wanted to do was highlight, like I said before, the weird and wonderful things about Britain. Obviously, there are some stories that you guys will probably have heard time and time again. And those stories we might not cover for personal reasons or for reasons of respect. So if you're hoping to hear somebody talk about the Jamie Bulger case...
That's not us.
No. Also pretty much a no-go when it comes to the Lee Rigby case.
Absolutely. That's at the respect of his mother's wishes.
Yeah.
Generally, she does not want people to talk about what happened.
Yeah. But yeah, there are, maybe there's some things that we talk about that might surprise you. Maybe you didn't know about, or, maybe didn't know a lot about in the first case. We'll just see how it goes. If you like it, then, do the thing that everybody asks you
Rate,
to do.
review,
Yes. Subscribe.
subscribe.
And also, we're always welcome constructive feedback.
Yeah, please be constructive. Don't be the person that's like, they suck because of this reason or that reason, or they don't know how to say this, or they got this fact wrong. Like, that's not helping anybody.
Yeah.
And you just look like an asshole.
Yeah. And I think, like, also, if you, like, look at how things like My Favourite Murder, Affirmative Murder, Morbid,
Yep.
just the ones that I can think of off the top of my head, where they're not done by professionals.
I'd say less so My Favourite Murder. They are professionals.
Yeah. But I think if you looked at what they did in the early days,
Yeah.
and obviously compare it to what they are like a year, 2 years later,
Yeah.
you know, it's all about growing and teething. And seeing, you know, how we can improve. So yeah, we'll let you know about our communication methods, our
Socials.
In the show notes, because I can't be bothered to try and trip over saying www. Then again, it's because we don't have a website. Awkward. But yeah, they'll be in the show notes. So feel free to use and not abuse, but certainly flower us.
Flower us?
Shower us.
Please don't flower us. I'm not a
With
crumpet.
praise.
Not a scone. Please don't cover me in flour.
And constructive feedback.
Yes.
Very much appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so is there anything you want to sort of talk about?
No.
No?
Not at the moment. Not that I can think of. I'll probably just interrupt you as you go along.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm going to start us off this week, and my story it's a little bit of tea, it's a little bit of crumpet.
Mm-hmm.
It basically has pretty much all of it, which I think is why it makes it such a good starting point. Because
Yeah.
it's got sex, it's got drugs, it's got rock and roll, it's got murder.
It's got literal rock and roll.
Yeah, a bit of conspiracy is in there.
Oh my
as well.
god, it's got everything.
And that is the story of Sid and Nancy.
Yay! I'm excited because I feel like I don't know nearly enough about this.
No. So here's the funny thing: is it's like when I first remember being told about this story, and I don't know why I got this in my head, but when I heard about this story, how it ended was completely different to how it really happened. I don't know if I somehow mixed it up with some other stories or something, but I basically thought that they kind of fought each other to the death.
See, now I was under the assumption that she killed herself and that, she'd killed him by giving him, shitty heroin or something. But it just goes to show that unless you're really looking deep down into the barrels of someone's story, you don't know, and then it gets misconstrued completely.
Yeah. And I think that this is the thing is that obviously it's a well-known story, but not a well-known story.
I think everyone knows, Sid and Nancy.
Yeah.
But they don't know what actually happened.
And it is kind of a tragic story as well, because this is not just about, two lovesick kids. There's the issues of drugs involved, violence, abuse. And it's just a really kind of sad story, but at the same time, it does form part of, a particular scene that the UK seems to want to hold dear.
I suppose there are good elements of it, but there are always going to be bad elements of things as well.
Yeah, there always is. I mean, no matter what story you really kind of talk about. So, that said, let's get into it.
Go for it.
So, following the return to the UK after managing the New York Dolls at the end of their career in the US, Malcolm McLaren found himself running a clothing store in London as well as managing a newly formed band, the Sex Pistols.
Yay!
The Sex Pistols would go on to be regarded as one of the most groundbreaking acts in the history of British popular music. They would develop a cult following, which would centre mainly around the Bromley contingent, named aptly after the area where the majority of the members grew up.
Wait, what's the Bromley contingent? I don't understand.
It's kind of like... I'm trying to think. Is it like... Oh my god.
So is it just
Eastbourne
like
beer kind of?
I was going to say, is it like people who are from Bromley, or
Yeah.
is it? Yeah, okay.
So
it's like
predominantly, a lot of them were from Bromley.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
And it was kind of like I guess like Eastbourne Beer. And I think there's a few others. It's just kind of like,
yeah, that kind of scene kind of thing.
That's just where it was. You know, everybody kind of knew everybody in a way, but at the same time, you weren't necessarily all friends.
Yeah, it was just a group of people that had the same connection to the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The same kind of people you would see out on a Saturday night when you went out
drinking, and clubbing and in the chip shop at 2 a.m.
Yeah, or kebab shop, depending on which area of town you're in.
Yeah.
So punk itself appealed mostly to the working class youth in Britain, who faced unemployment, a stagnant economy, and the reality that the nation was still recovering from World War II.
Which is mental, because like you've said that rationing ended in the 50s, and I looked it up and it was like July 4th, 1954. So that effect has still been going on for 30 years post-war?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if you think about the First World War, that it basically bankrupted a lot of countries, and I think that's what's often talked about in when it comes to what led up to the Second World War, is because Germany were they were poor, they'd run out of all money, things were not looking great, and they became disillusioned.
And then Hitler decided to be a bit of a bastard.
Hitler just swooped in and took opportunity on that, but we're not here to talk about that. So mostly because war does tend to leave a nasty taste in the mouth.
Yes.
So there's no dispute that punk was founded in America.
I would like to dispute that, to be honest. Yeah.
Why?
Like, I don't think it really... You can say, like, oh, punk music, but, like, the whole genre of punk is very British. The style, the culture, the music as well is, it would have been nothing without its British roots.
No, that's true. And I kind of get onto that with saying that it is actually very much the subculture that was defined by the British scene itself. So Johnny Rotten would be the voice of the British punk. It would actually be a scrappy-looking, intense, and seemingly carefree Sid Vicious that would become the personification of the era.
Ah, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So realistically, when people think of punk, they actually think, they probably, 9 times out of 10 would probably think about, the Sex Pistols, Johnny Rotten's voice, Sid's, image, because he was, I would say, probably out of the group, definitely the more...
It's the one, he's got the style that you still see today, that studded leather, band patches, two-toned plaid trousers, that kind of thing. It's very much what he did, spiky hair.
Yeah.
It's very his style that is still incorporated into a lot of people's own style today.
Yeah. That said, though, America bringing punk over here is also what led to such a huge heroin increase. Yeah, so I remember reading an article about it, and at one point, nobody was really touching it.
Yeah.
And then it kind of came over, and then everybody started using it. It was the itch drug of the time, for that that group of people, and it, in a way, or I think there is some suggestion that it kind of helped in the death of the first wave of punk.
Yeah.
Born on the 10th of May 1957 to John and Annie Ritchie, Simon John Ritchie was moved to Ibiza with his mother, Anne. So Anne and his father John actually met in the armed forces, which I found quite surprising, because when you learn a bit about Anne, she doesn't seem like the type that would be in the armed forces.
Yeah.
But maybe, I don't know, maybe it was just an easy way to get some steady money.
Maybe that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, it's a good, reliable job if you haven't got good qualifications coming out of school.
Because it was, that's sort of what Dad did, really, wasn't
Yeah.
it? So shortly, yeah. So as I said, shortly after his birth, Anne actually moved him and herself to Ibiza, and what the intention was John, the father, was meant to follow them,
Yeah.
a short time later. However, it soon became apparent that that wasn't the case, and John effectively disappears off the radar, and Anne comes to the realization that she's been abandoned.
Oh, great.
Yeah, so she's got obviously this child with her, and she decides to move back to England, and she meets a gentleman called Christopher Beverley in 1965, and they get married.
Okay.
But sadly, Christopher dies of cancer about 6 months later.
That's awful.
Yeah, so I don't know whether he knew he had cancer and decided to marry her anyway, or, and she
Oh, yeah,
knew,
so
or
she gets like his house or whatever.
I don't know, but they sort of rented around Tunbridge Wells area for a little while before making it back up into the London area,
Yeah.
which is where they settled for a while. So it was actually in 1973 that Simon would go on to meet John Lydon.
So how old's he then? When was he born?
So he's
19?
1957, so he would be mid-teens?
Mid-teens,
Yeah.
mid-20s?
No,
No,
not early
mid-teens,
20s, no.
mid to late teens.
Yeah. By this time, he was also going by John.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And because him and Lydon were squatting with two other Johns,
Oh, no.
one was a school friend named John Wardle, also known as John Wobble, I think I've written that right, and John Gray, they quickly became known as the Four Johns within their sort of group and their network.
Can I just say, sorry, who willingly chooses to have the surname John Wobble? Like,
I don't know. I did read up on him, but I can't remember anything I read up.
oh.
It's not, like I said, it's not his real name. It's a stage name.
Oh, God, that's even worse.
Yeah, so, but I can't remember what band he was in.
Not the Wobbles.
No. I don't think so, anyway.
He's like John and the Wobbles.
So he would eventually earn himself the name Sid Vicious, and this is after John Lydon's pet hamster, who was affectionately called Sid.
Why is the hamster called... What was the hamster's real name?
Sid.
Sydney? So
Sydney
it wasn't
or Sid.
affectionately called, nicknamed Sydney, and it was called Sid.
Yeah.
So it was really, really called Sydney.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And then they just nicknamed it Sid.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So basically Sid bit Sid on the finger.
Sid post Sid.
Yeah, and he
injected him with Sid powers?
Yes, apparently. He exclaimed, Sid is really vicious. This is quite funny because John Lydon goes on to say that, the little hamster was actually quite docile.
Just
so
hated John Sid.
Yeah, just apparently really didn't, took exception to Simon's finger that
Sid
one
Simon.
time.
Sid Simon John.
Yeah, but that's how he earned that name. So Sid was not part of one of the founding members of the Sex Pistols. His career in music actually started in 1976 when he joined the Flowers of Romance.
That's a beautiful band name, actually.
It is, actually. I quite like it.
I'd quite like a band called that now.
But, yeah, I haven't heard any of their music, so I don't know really what they sound like. Are they another punk band, or are they maybe something different? I don't know. But he also went to play drums for Susie and the Banshees.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, at their first gig, which was at the 100 Club Punk Festival. Now, this is quite an infamous moment because he was also being considered as the lead singer for The Damned at the time. However, he never turned up for his audition, and the part eventually went to Dave Vanian.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So Sid accused Dave Vanian of being the reason why he missed his appointment. He basically said he sabotaged him, and obviously this led to Sid being quite bitter and being fueled by drugs
and rage.
Yes, he threw a pint glass towards the stage on the day 2 of the 100 Club Punk Festival with the intentions of hitting Vanian. However, it missed. It hit a pillar instead, and unfortunately, it blinded a girl who was in the crowd. So,
that's awful.
And he for this, he did actually get arrested. He was charged, and he was imprisoned as well in Ashford's remand centre. And I think this is when his mum was visiting him and slipping him. She was smuggling in drugs for him.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I know that obviously it was different back in the 70s. The security's not what it is today. Well, we all know security's pretty rubbish at prisons, but that's mental. Like, the idea you're like, I'm just going to take my son some drugs in jail. He's already in jail. Like, how is that improving his situation?
I don't know, but I mean, I think you could draw a conclusion that maybe Anne was not so much as a mother as she was a supplier.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'll get onto that in a little bit. So yeah, most people would tend to say that Sid was a pretty cheery, sort of person. However, he did have this dark side, which came out in this particular incident, but it also came out when he assaulted enemy journalist Nick Kent. He threatened BBC DJ Bob Harris. And he also went on to strike a audience member in the head with his bass guitar in San Antonio after being heckled.
Wow.
Yeah, so...
I mean, don't heckle people. If you don't like someone, don't flipping go to the show.
Well,
but...
the thing is that all of these shows took place in the Bible Belt, which I will sort of touch on later. But basically, this is where the rift between McLaren and the Sex Pistols began, because then Lydon felt that McLaren was trying to sabotage them.
Okay.
And there is like a particular, they're literally the show before they broke up. At the end, Johnny Lydon goes on to say something into the microphone along the lines of, "Do you ever get the feeling you're being fucked over?" But I don't think it's exactly that line, but I mean, it was filmed as well, and you can see the contempt in his eyes. And they have, obviously the Bible Belt's not gonna take these guys on very well.
Yeah, they're not going to be as accepting and welcoming as...
So what on earth McLaren was thinking, I don't know.
Oh yeah, let's just send this ridiculously hardcore punk band into the Bible Belt, and this band sings about anarchy and anti-religion and all this kind of thing, and you're going to send them to one of the most religious places in America.
And that's what they did. But we'll sort of touch on that a little bit more later, because obviously there's a lot going on at the same time then. So as I touched on before, Sid was actually exposed to drugs at an early age because of his mother. Now, she was not only just a drug user, but she also was involved in drug trafficking. And she would often use Sid as a child, when he was a toddler, as effectively as a drug mule. So she used to hide drugs in his nappy when she was smuggling between the UK and Spain. Also, there's indication that or a story that she actually gave him heroin as a gift on his birthday. I think it was his 17th birthday. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, he was actually Anne that got him into intravenous drugs.
Oh, wow.
Not Nancy, who obviously everybody would go to know Nancy as the heroin peddler.
Yeah. She was like the Yoko Ono of the Sex Pistols.
Kind of what she was almost described as, really. But in 1977, Sid was asked to join the Sex Pistols following the departure of Glenn Matlock from the band. So
all I can think about is Abe Simpson and the Matlock.
I bet he gets that of it, actually.
He does. Maybe he is Matlock from The Simpsons.
Can you imagine John Lydon calling him up and be like
Matlock? John Lydon's a bit of an asshole now. He's like a Trump supporter.
I know, he's a bit... Anyway, so even though he was part of the band, he actually missed a bulk of the studio sessions that Sex Pistols had going on to record their studio album.
Was this because he was in jail?
No, this is actually because he was in hospital, having been diagnosed with hepatitis. So it wasn't clear which one, whether it was B or C, and there was no clear indication of how he actually contracted it, but I think you could sort of draw a very vague line towards the use of
drugs. Yeah,
I do believe that the band didn't really go to visit him while he was in hospital.
It's too punk rock to, like, it's not punk enough to go and visit your friends.
It was only really his mum,
who was probably slipping him drugs again.
Yeah, probably.
Jesus.
So yeah, however, it was around this time also he met Nancy Spungen.
Nancy.
or nauseating Nancy.
Nauseating that's a lovely
Yeah,
nickname for someone. I
yeah.
mean,
It's yeah. I think I'll touch on it a bit as how this happened. So anyway, Nancy. She was born on the 27th of February 1958, and she was born in Philadelphia to a middle-class Jewish family from Lower Moreland Township.
that was very unexpected. I wasn't
Yes.
expecting her to be like a middle class Jew
Yeah.
in a good suburb.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's like that very typical she turned to drugs and punk story now, but like, if you were telling me that's kind of one of the origins of it, I'd be like, no.
Yeah, it's strange, and it does kind of come up a little bit in her sort of story, her time in New York,
Mm.
before she actually travelled across the pond.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she was the oldest of three children. So she had a younger sister and a younger brother. Her father, Frank, was a travelling salesman, and her mother, Deborah, owned a organic food shop. So they were doing
That
pretty
is
well.
really middle class, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's very bourgeoisie, upper sort of higher standard than most people are. You've got your middle class, they all work like office jobs, and mum's like a secretary, but that is something else. That is.
And you'd think you kind of almost could be mistaken in thinking like, how did it sort of come to this?
Yeah, and also like a traveling salesman, he must have been doing quite well for that to be. Well, I suppose it's different in the 50s, but like nowadays, if someone's like a traveling salesman, they're not doing too great in life, and you know that's got that stigma to it. So it's a very odd idea that she's from this really well-to-do family, and that her dad has like got that particular type of job. Really, I guess.
Yeah, but that's where we kind of are. But this, I think, kind of does explain it a little bit as to why Nancy was the way she was. So, from the get-go, Nancy could be described as troubled. She had been born with cyanosis, and she'd also nearly died from oxygen deprivation caused by her umbilical cord being wrapped around her neck.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So on top of this, it was also reported that Nancy was diagnosed with ABO incompatibility, and she did have to go undergo a number of blood transfusions. I don't know what ABO is, but I would imagine it's
got something to do with the blood groups, because you can be A, B, A, and O.
maybe.
And one of them's like a universal donor.
Yeah. By 3 months old, Nancy had been prescribed liquid barbiturates to try and control her screaming and crying fits.
Wow. That's not okay.
Yeah.
There's got to be another way to... Even back then, like, you don't just give a child barbiturates to stop it from crying.
I don't know. I just sort of, there's so many layers to her story, in terms of her early life. That,
That's like a whole thing on its own.
Yeah. I think it's like a drama, you could make a movie out of it, I think, in all honesty. And I don't mean the one that, oh my God, what's his name? Oh, he's an actor. He was in Batman. His sister is in
Christian
EastEnders.
Bale? Oh, Gary Oldman.
That's it. Yeah, he played Sid.
Did he?
In a movie about Sid and Nancy. I can't remember the name of the actress though. Interestingly, Courtney Love actually appeared in that movie as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So in her book, Nancy's mother described her daughter. I looked for her through the nursery window. My eyes scanned one infant after another, sleeping peacefully in a row. She wasn't one of them. She was lying in a glass enclosed isolate in the very back of the nursery, naked except for the patch over her navel where the transfusion had been done. Her mouth was wide open and she was screaming hysterically. Her yellow body was thrashing about angrily. The fire to description was an apt one. She looked as if she were amidst a battle.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I also did read that there were situations where basically if they could get her to go to sleep, they would creep around the house. They would be so scared to wake her up because she would scream and cry so much that even if and this is what I find bizarre, even if they had like neighbours over for dinner or something, they'd ask them to whisper or not talk. And it's like, well, if you're going to live like this, then why have you got people coming over to your house?
Yeah, that's a bit odd. Like, if you know your child doesn't... I suppose you can't just live in fear of your child screaming all the time. You can't let that be the be-all or end-all of your existence. But at the same time... Sorry, I was going to sneeze. Yeah, I mean... if you're going to have people over, send the kid to the grandparents or something if they're about, it's not.
Yeah, I think it sort of, having read some of the stuff that I have, that I've not put in this because I'm not really there to sort of cast judgment, but some of the comments that I have read by people who have perhaps been biased one way or another felt that they pandered to Nancy so much that that sort of almost encouraged the behaviour that came out.
Yeah.
And actually, this is kind of like a really good example of this. So as growing up, she was quite aggressive and violent towards her younger sister, but oddly very calming and caring with her brother. And there was one incident where after dinner, Nancy wanted to watch a particular show on TV in the den and sit in the easy chair. Susie was already sitting in the chair watching something else. Nancy changed the station. Hey, Susie protested. I want to watch that, Nancy snapped. Get up. What for? I want to sit there. No. Why don't you sit somewhere else, Nancy? I offered. She ignored me. Get the fuck up, you little shithead.
Wow.
Yeah.
How old was she?
I don't know. It's definitely not that old though when this happened. I mean, it carries on this way. So get out of the fucking chair, you fucking goddamn shithead. Frank spoke up. Don't talk to your sister that way, Nancy. Or what, asshole? Or.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And what, they just did nothing?
There was very. I mean, it even goes on to say here, Frank, don't start with her, I cautioned. She can't talk to her sister that way. You're rising to her bait. I asked you not to be, not to. Let it be. You're rising to her bait by letting her get away with her crap. Stop yelling, begged David. I'm trying to watch TV. Yeah, and then it just sort of
escalates.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
And soon everybody's shouting at each other, and ultimately Susie runs to her room crying, and yeah, the parents give in to Nancy.
So she got exactly what she wanted.
Yeah, because at the point there's this point where it's like Frank even says, Susie, I order you to get out of that chair at once.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Like nobody's sitting in the damn chair.
Oh no, Nancy sat in the chair.
Oh, for heaven.
And it kind of ends with Frank saying, are you happy now?
No.
And Nancy turns around and says, shut the fuck up, I'm trying to watch the show.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, she had a temper, all right.
Oh, sounds it.
Yes, but despite this and her really sort of violent ways, Nancy scored highly on the intelligence quotient, and she excelled academically as well, to the point that she was able to skip the 3rd grade.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
She actually boasted on the Ephraim Allen show that she had an IQ of 172 when a caller called in to heckle her and basically called her dumb.
I mean, that's pretty, yeah, that is genius level, but you're not talking like, there's people whose IQ is at like 201 and stuff.
Yeah, but she was able to skip a grade.
Yeah. That's like average intelligence.
Yeah. She actually graduated from high school 2 years early, so she graduated in 1974, and she went on to attend Colorado Boulder University at the age of 16. However, that was pretty short-lived because she was arrested just 5 months in for possession of marijuana, and then she was later arrested for possession of stolen goods.
Oh.
Yeah, so that resulted in her being expelled from the university and then banished from Colorado.
What, the entirety of Colorado?
Yeah.
Like, get out of the whole
By the sounds
state.
of it. Yeah. And that's kind of, she gets to the age of 17 and she decides that she wants to leave home. So, yeah, she leaves home and she goes straight to New York City. And she's got no qualifications. She's young, and so she ends up working as a stripper, and then moving on to prostitution as well.
Sex work.
Yeah. And it's also here that her addiction to drugs also started to flourish as well. So this is when she started getting into the likes of heroin. So from what I sort of read on this sort of situation is that she kind of didn't really fit in because she wasn't from a working class background or a blue collar background, I think they call it in America, whereas we call it working class here. So, she didn't really know the same hardships as those kids of the scene did.
Yeah.
So she always was seen a little bit of an
Like a
outcast.
bit of a poser, like we would say now. You don't,
Yeah,
there's like that aesthetic and appeal that, like, oh, you can't understand what we're talking about because you've
mm,
never experienced it.
yeah. But at the same time, she had her own demons, and she'd been through some, pretty rough things in terms of medical
Yeah,
problems.
but I can still see where they're kind of coming
Oh
from.
yeah,
There's
totally.
the whole different world of being working class, lower working class, hand to mouth, than there is being, she's, her parents probably could afford to give her medical treatments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They just pandered to her too
Mm,
much from the sounds of it.
mm,
Whereas, like, these kids might have working, class parents who can't afford to take them to the doctor,
yeah.
who have suffered, who've lost family members
Yeah.
because of that. And then here she is like, my life is awful because of this. And it's like,
Well,
you don't
I
understand.
don't know if she ever came into it and was like, my life is awful. I think it was very much a case of they quickly learned that she wasn't from around here,
Yeah.
as it were. So she'd made this kind of decision that she was going to bag herself a rock star
A bag
boyfriend.
herself a rich guy.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose they weren't making that much money back then,
I
were
don't
they? I
know, but
don't.
she had sort of set her eyes on a couple of people, and had been rebuffed already. But the other thing is also when she sort of got into the scene, she didn't sort of match it because she was quite, she wore quite frumpy clothing. She had curly dark brown hair. And I mean, when I've seen pictures of her as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, she, as a baby, she was very adorable.
Mm,
She was pretty.
mm.
I wouldn't say that she was above and beyond kind of pretty. She was just normal.
Yeah, sort of average.
Yeah, so it's almost kind of difficult when you kind of look at the first life of Nancy with the brown hair, with that, that very normal attire and the family life. You would never imagine that, what was bubbling underneath the surface, the rage, the constant rage. And then she kind of, when she was in New York, she kind of remade herself.
Yeah.
So, she turned up one day with the bleach blonde hair, the smudged makeup, the torn fishnet and leopard print and leather and studs and she also had quite a brash voice as well. So she was very loud, and that's sort of what sort of led her to pick up the name Nauseating Nancy, was because she was quite loud
Oh.
and brash and
So she's kind of nauseating in that she grates on you.
yeah, so that's kind of what it was. So she kind of followed some of the American bands over to London in
Hmm.
1997. She had initially set her eyes on John Lydon with the hope of wooing him, but he made it very apparent that he had no interest in her. I think some of the comments that I've read from John Lydon and maybe even a few other people, they would have been happy if Nancy had, disappeared and gone back to
Yeah.
America and never been seen again. But by this time, she had found out that the perfect way to get attention was through drugs. And it wasn't just being a user of drug, but it was also being the supplier of. If she was a supplier, then she had something that those famous people wanted. And that is exactly how she got Sid. So she started off wanting Jerry Nolan from the New York Dolls, quickly moved on to Sid Vicious and became his peddler, effectively.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. There seems to be a theme with women in his life.
Yeah, I would be interesting to know what the relationship between Anne and Nancy may have been like. I
Yeah.
can't imagine it was particularly pleasant.
I can't imagine. I mean, yeah. I always want to be like, she doesn't want her to be dating her son because she's peddling drugs to him. You were doing the same thing, woman.
Yeah.
So you
Well,
don't.
I don't know. I think maybe that it more came down to he's my customer, not
Yeah,
yours.
back off.
Yeah. And I mean, some of the things I read that, like once Nancy got her claws into him, she was going to do everything in her power to make sure that she didn't lose him.
Yeah,
Yeah, so obviously she becomes his girlfriend, and they become madly, truly, deeply in love.
supposedly.
Yeah, but there was obviously this violence in amongst them as well.
Hmm.
They were only actually together for 19 months, and it was a purely drug-fueled relationship. And it is
Yeah.
actually kind of one of the things is that Sid's mental health, his physical health, everything about him quickly deteriorated from that point on. And if you ever actually see like interviews with him in that period, there's actually a couple of interviews where him and Nancy are together. Clearly, they are in the midst of being very much drug addicts. It's kind of almost difficult to watch because you are literally you're watching the drug, you're not watching the artist. So as I said, they were both violent, both emotionally and physically. Nancy was said to often be emotionally abusive towards Sid. This would rile him up to the point that he would lash out at her physically. But needless to say, the other members of the band and Malcolm McLaren were not such fans of Nancy, to the point that she was actually banned from coming on the very much doomed tour of the USA in 1978. So that kind
Oh.
of goes back to when I'm talking about the Bible Belt.
Yeah.
So for
I like.
whatever reason, I don't know too much about it, but Malcolm McLaren decides to book him a string of gigs in the Deep South.
I
Or
didn't realize that they weren't around for very long.
no, not
Like,
at all.
it was
Not
like 5 years max.
no, I don't
Less
even know.
than
I
that,
don't know. I
probably.
think it was not even that really. So he basically put them on these shows that in areas where they were just not going to be accepted. And I maybe he did it for the shock factor, or something to that effect.
Mm.
I don't know, but it obviously backfired in a massive way. Because ultimately, this was the end for the Sex Pistols. They disbanded after their appearance in San Francisco, and things between the band and McLaren had deteriorated pretty
There's got to
really
be more
badly.
to it than they went. They were in San Francisco, and San Francisco was like, nah. San Francisco, the home of grunge music.
I don't think it was
Like,
necessarily San Francisco. Like I said, I think there was a number of situations,
situations,
like I
and
said about
then
the
this was just the
yeah,
last thing.
San Antonio situation, sorry. And I think there was maybe a couple of others. So it was
Wait, were they ever in San Francisco?
well, this is that they played San Francisco and then they
Oh, that was their
disbanded.
last
Yeah,
show.
yeah.
Okay.
So without a band, Sid was effectively left to his own devices, and he did what any good punk
Kid.
kid would do. Not went on a bender, and he ultimately overdosed on methadone, and he ended up actually getting hospitalized in New York.
Okay.
So we're now in New York, which is really kind of where this is all going to come to a fever pitch,
Okay.
between Sid and Nancy. I think one of the other things I kind of didn't mention earlier, which I wish I had now, just to kind of give you a bit more of a perspective of the kind of person Sid was and how troubled he really was as a person. He not only was shooting up, but he was also self-harming as well.
Oh.
And he went to one show and he'd actually used a bit of broken mirror write, to dig into himself, onto his chest, saying, "Give me a fix."
Oh. Whoa.
Yeah, and there
Okay.
are some quite iconic pictures of him floating around the internet where he's got quite big gashes across his arms, and he doesn't seem that scared about showing it.
Mm.
I think there was also a moment where one of his friends, I think this was actually John Wardle as well, when they were in school, they went to see the counsellor or something, and the counsellor said to John Wardle, Simon has just said that he wants to kill himself. What do you think of that? And then he says, oh, they were only like, I think they were only like 13 or 14 or something. And he said, oh, I think that's really funny. But he recounted that he said when he knew then that something wasn't right with Sid, he
Mm.
said that, he actually wanted to end his life.
Yeah, it's not a normal thing, regardless
No,
of.
not for a
Not for a
14-year-old.
14-year-old. And if you are 14 and you feel like that, then please get help.
Yeah,
There are people out there who want to listen to you.
yeah.
And it's just really sad that his friends didn't know what to say to him. And
No, but then I think you've got to remember about the time as well.
yeah, and the fact that the counsellor's right there and they haven't done anything either.
Mm. So whilst in New York, Sid and Nancy were reunited. They actually headed to Paris for a little while.
So when did they unreunite? Well, then when he was on tour, she wasn't allowed to come with.
Yeah, so she wasn't allowed to go with them,
Oh,
go with the Sex Pistols while on the tour, which is really quite stupid because, she was an American.
yeah,
And I think what the other thing was is that also she had a bit of more of an idea of where the scene was in America than it seemed like Malcolm McLaren did.
yeah. Coming off of the New York Dolls, was it?
Yeah,
Then that's a completely different genre,
yeah,
different scene of people. They might have been really popular in the Bible Belt. I don't know.
yeah.
I don't know
don't
anything
either,
about
but
them.
yeah. So he, I think they actually had. There is also another story where they actually were conspiring to kidnap her and sent to basically stick her on a plane at Heathrow with a one-way ticket and tell her to basically fuck off.
What, like the band?
Yeah,
Oh my
everybody
god,
that knew her.
we hate you that
But
much.
her and Sid had become so codependent they couldn't pull
Them apart.
yeah, couldn't get them apart from each other. So it just never happened. I don't know whether they thought that banning her from going on the tour would give them a chance to make, Sid see sense.
But then you've got all these other things going on, and you just never get around to it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think also the other thing is that by this point he felt that he was so madly in love with her. He was
Yeah.
blinded by this love and also by the drugs that
Mm.
there was just no getting them apart from each other.
Mm.
So yeah, so they went off to Paris to help film The Great Rock and Roll Swindle. This didn't go too well. Reason being is Vicious basically was constantly shooting up in his hotel room, and Nancy was constantly berating him. Julian Temple, who was the director, tells of a time when Nancy actually slit her own wrists in a fake suicide attempt to make Sid feel bad for leaving her for any length of time, even if it was just to go do some filming. So, like I said, they were very codependent, and she didn't like, he was there for a reason. He'd been asked to go and do some filming.
Mm.
And as far as she, it was almost coming to the point that no, they were going to hold themselves up in a hotel room, and that was it. They were gonna that was their story. That was their nest, their little nub nest, and the
Yeah,
rest of the world didn't exist beyond that point.
yeah, and she's very much like she's not used to not getting her own way. So she's already shown that she will do whatever she has to do to get the attention and get what she wants. And this doesn't surprise me that she'd go that far.
And yeah, there's all sorts of kinds of thing. I think like some of the recounts I've read about her, it doesn't seem very many people in Sid's life liked her.
Yeah.
There's actually
It doesn't seem like very many people liked her in general.
yeah. So I mean, there's Chrissy Hind actually wrote about them in her book, Reckless: My Life as a Pretender, about the meeting those two. And obviously also she talks about when she finds out that Sid passes away. Who could forget that shriek, a sound not unlike that of an untrained cockatoo. Sid, Sid, when are you going to make me my famous cream cheese bagel? Sid! Or Sid, my hair, ow, my hair, Sid. Another colleague of mine, a bass player visiting from Paris, who I brought over to Sid's Pindock Muse hovel to meet score from the now famous Sex Pistol, has slammed the door and inadvertently trapped a few of the Claft's peroxide curls in it. So yeah, there was she was not really looked at
Favourably
by a lot of people, but his death seemed to be, more not shocking. I think it's almost like everybody saw it coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was everything I kind of read about her is very damning in a way, I guess is the best way I could put it. So in that time, Nancy sort of became Sid's manager.
Oh, I bet that really cheered Anne up.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I didn't really see much on, there wasn't much about their relationship that I could find anyway. I mean, if people do know, then that would be great because, it'd be interesting to see. But again, I don't see it as a disapproving mother and, a rebellious girlfriend. I literally do see it as two drug dealers.
And a customer.
Yeah, and
And
a customer.
even Nancy's getting something from him.
Yeah, and he, he had a lot of money as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, obviously she wasn't off spending it on expensive things except for heroin.
Heroin.
And I don't really know how much heroin was back in those days.
Um,
I don't know if it was a little bit more.
Probably not as expensive as it is
Oh yeah, definitely
today.
not.
Inflation.
So he actually did go and perform with the likes of Mick Jones from The Clash, Glenn Matlock, and Rat Scabies from The Damned as well.
I love the name of the people from The Damned.
Yeah, so he also played most of his solo shows at Max's Kansas City. And he did actually draw quite a large crowd, despite the fact that he was actually very hostile towards them as well. So he did have a very short, but solo career.
Short but very successful
Yeah,
from the sounds of things.
because from what I read, that he sort of could play the bass, but not like anything special. I mean, let's face it, none of them could play that.
I don't think that was the intention.
Yeah, but he definitely was a better singer than John Lydon, and
probably,
I think there was mentions that if he had come along first, he would have been the singer.
Yeah, and that's
not John
that
Lydon.
prolific, if he's good at songwriting as well.
Yeah, so there's that as well. So yeah, but the problem with that is the drugs and their obsession for each other was starting to take over. Eventually, they holed themselves up in a room in the famous Hotel Chelsea in Manhattan, New York.
Yeah, like you were like, it's the famous hotel. Never heard of it.
Oh, quite a lot of famous people have stayed there, like Bob Dylan, I think, was one.
I mean, I guess I wouldn't have heard of it because I don't tend to like, I want to know everything about the autobiography of this person's life. So therefore, it's never come up in anything I know about I don't want to say the Lansdale. What's the one the Elise Lamb stayed at?
I don't know.
I can't remember what it's called, but that one, everybody fucking knows about that one because if you're into true crime and mystery stuff.
See, for me, Lansdowne is a really common hotel name.
I think we've got one in.
Yeah, and I think there's one in Eastbourne,
yeah,
isn't there?
There is. There's loads. It's one of those. It's like the Red Lion pub.
It's one in every town.
There's one in every town.
So basically, what followed that was a constant line of drug use and violence.
I obviously can't really comment because I'm not ever done drugs or been a drug addict, but that sounds painful. It sounds like being drunk constant, like way worse than that. But like the come down must hurt so much. Like just the thought of it makes my skin want to be like, ugh.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is that I don't even know if there was any respite at all.
Oh my God.
I think it was just constant because they weren't only obviously getting drugs, but they were also going to methadone clinics as well.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so you're trying to get off the drugs by taking the methadone, but then you're just taking the drugs anyway.
Yeah.
So you're guaranteed a fix at least once a day.
Yeah. And also they were constantly or frequently being visited by drug dealers in New York and also fellow users as well. So there was no escape from it, or at least no escape that wouldn't be difficult to
find them again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the 12th of October 1978, the hotel switchboard took an outside call stating there's trouble in room 100 before the caller hung up. A bellman was sent to the room to investigate, but before he gets there, another call comes in stating someone is sick and needs help. The bellman goes into the room 100 and finds Nancy slumped between the toilet and the bathroom sink, in her underwear and sadly dead from a single stab wound to her stomach.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's... well, everything I know about gut and stomach wounds is that they take a long time to...
Yeah, that was my understanding as well.
Because they're sluggish and they really hurt. So, but I'm not imagining she wandered around that room for 3 or 4 days bleeding to death.
No. So obviously I'll get into sort of what comes out of it. But what seems very odd is that, I don't know how to explain it really. There doesn't seem to be a lot of blood. So there is actually a photo taken by the press of Nancy's body at the crime scene.
Yum.
And initially, I mean, when you look at it, you can't really make out a lot of blood. And bear in mind also, this isn't a scabby hotel. This is a really nice hotel. So you wouldn't expect to see sort of like stains on the floor. There is staining on the floor from blood, but it doesn't seem like enough to...
Yeah, and I don't see him cleaning up.
Well, allegedly he did. So I'll get on to that. Sid is initially missing,
Hmm.
but he's then later found by the police pacing the halls of the hotel. He seems confused and unsure of what happened, but he is promptly arrested. So,
This makes sense. He's the only one that's, other than her, that's in there usually. Well, other than the drug dealers.
Drug dealers and the other users.
Yeah.
So it kind of brings us to the question of what happened. And the thing is nobody really knows. And the reason for this is partly because of the police's perception of what happened, and therefore probably didn't put much effort into it. They figured it was an open shut case. A junkie is killed by another junkie in either a drug-fueled rage or over drugs or something. We've got our man, send her off to her family to be buried.
Yeah.
But according to Sid, the last thing he remembered was being in bed following taking a large dose of it's a sleeping drug that you can get in America. Tunial, I think it's called.
Tylenol? No.
No. Tunial, I've got here.
I have no idea.
No, I don't either. But basically, it was a strong sedative. The night before had involved fighting between Nancy and Sid, both physical and obviously verbally. And a lot of this had actually been done in front of witnesses who would attest that Sid had taken enough of this medication to knock him out cold. He would not have had the strength to pick up a knife and stab her.
Mm-hmm.
He says that he does remember, though, before passing out, Nancy was sitting on the edge of the bed playing with a knife.
Okay.
Yeah. He woke up at about 10:30 a.m. the next morning, and he thought he'd actually wet himself because his jeans were soaked around the sort of top area, so around his crotch and his thighs. But it quickly came to the realization that it was actually blood.
Okay.
So that's what, again, is a little bit weird. He talks about the blood on his
But nowhere
trousers,
else.
but nowhere else.
So, like, almost as if she's stabbed on top of him and then
or
moved.
she's stabbed and falls on him and bleeds.
Yeah, and that would
heavily.
explain why there's not a load of blood.
But then did she crawl to
How
the
did
bathroom?
how did she get to the bathroom?
So he went to the bathroom, and that's where he found Nancy stabbed but still breathing. He says that he didn't think she was actually dying, so he went to the methadone clinic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose I was like, I'm trying to be like, you wouldn't do that, but like if you're so drug dependent, nothing's gonna get in your way of getting your next fix.
Yeah.
So fuck that she's dying, might be dying on the floor. She's not as important as that thing.
And I don't know whether she was actually still conscious or if she was actually passed out. I mean, maybe she, maybe they got into another one of their little spates and she told him to fuck off, and he, was like, well, deal with it yourself, you bitch.
Sort yourself out.
Yeah, sort yourself out. So he says he returns, but that's when he finds that Nancy has died. Well, he's away. Panicking, he cleans the knife and also tries to clean Nancy too. And when that doesn't work, he calls for help and temporarily disappears. So obviously he's in a panic now. Not to mention he's also on a methadone fix, and he doesn't really remember what happened the night before. And I can't imagine. I know he said he woke up at 10:30, and I'm not assuming I know how this particular sedative works, but even if you've slept for however many hours, I think you still wake up a bit groggy.
Yeah, I mean, most of the ones that I know other people take, they generally are out of it the next day.
Yeah.
They're not 100%.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not. I mean, not quite the same thing. But when I take night nurse, I only ever take one of the tablets, not two,
because I can't wake up. So
yeah, and I find that I tend to shake a lot as well. I feel very trembly and dizzy, and it's not. Yeah, I don't like taking them. But sometimes when you can't sleep because your nose is so blocked up.
Night nurse.
So, who really killed Nancy?
I did it. I've solved it. I wasn't even alive. I solved it. My ghost did it. My time traveling ghost self did it. I went back in time and did it. No, but really, okay. But really, who did it?
So the first suspect is obviously Sid himself, and that's who the police think did it. As far as they're concerned, he was the one that stabbed her, and then because he was so drugged up, he decided to go to sleep and then wake up a little bit more sober and be like, oh crap, what have I done? But as I mentioned earlier, he'd taken 30 of these tablets.
And people had seen him take these tablets.
Yeah.
It's not like he was like asleep and people saw him asleep.
He was in a coma.
Yeah.
practical.
30
30
tablets.
tablets. How he was not dead, I don't know. But then again,
Oh
I don't know
my
how strong these particular
God.
tablets are. So, but yeah, they said that he would have had no strength or ability to do it.
Hmm.
So
And that could have been backed up in court, I guess.
I don't, maybe.
Like you get a doctor and you're like, yo, what happens if you take 30 of these tablets?
And they're probably going to say to you, you will die.
Yeah, so how did he survive? Well, who knows?
He's probably developed like a bit of a,
It's like Keith Richard, he's just pickled.
yeah, probably. So the second suspect is a guy called Rocket's Red Glare.
I'm sorry, what? Rocket
Red Glare.
Red Glare?
Yeah.
Is that his real name?
No, that's a sort of like name he's going by.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So his actual name is Michael.
Oh, okay. No, go back to Rocket.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
So anyway, so Rocket was actually one of the 6 people identified as being in the room that night through fingerprints. So
Yeah.
there's obviously fingerprints everywhere, and he was there that night before the incident occurred. And he also let himself in quite often to the unlocked room.
Okay.
Now, there could be there is a potential reason why that's not so dodgy, because he at the time was actually Sid Nancy's bodyguard, but he was also their drug dealer as well. So it is possible that, you know, it was
There's
quite
a
normal for him
lot
to
of
walk in and
people
out.
in this who are, I do this, but I also sell you drugs. Like, I'm your girlfriend, but I also sell you drugs. I'm your mother, but I also sell you drugs.
Everybody seems to be on drugs. It's almost like, I think the way you look at it, it's like Sid just did not have a chance.
No, not
There was no chance.
no,
for Sid.
not when this started. I mean,
No.
if he'd walked away from Nancy at the beginning, maybe, but
No, I think the fact is that his mother would still have had her claws in him.
yeah.
So yeah, and it's also alleged that before his death in 2001, Rocket did actually brag about killing Nancy.
Oh wow.
So he was reported after the incident, after the Nancy's murder, he had death. I can't really say it's a murder because we don't know 100% sure if it was. He'd actually been walking around with a wad of cash tied with a purple hair tie that was owned by Nancy. And it's also said that approximately $2,500 had gone missing from the couple's room after the murder. So that does kind of suggest that, where did he get this money?
Yeah.
Why has he
Why
got
is
Nancy
it?
hair
Yeah.
tie? Where's their money? But
He's also a drug dealer.
yeah, and he could have just picked the hair tie up on his
Yeah.
way out.
Exactly. That could they could have given him that money to get them more drugs, and they just don't remember. Like,
Yeah.
and he's just it was already in the hair tie, and they've just given it to him.
Yeah. And I mean, from what I've heard, they didn't really make any attempts to hide the money. It was everywhere. But I mean, both of us have longish hair.
Yeah.
And
I
how
have
many?
multiple hair ties. They're all
Yeah.
I keep finding them everywhere.
They're everywhere. They're in the bathroom. I think the occasions there's been several on the table.
Yeah.
You know,
In
you
the
find
kitchen, they're in your bedroom. I found a few on the floor earlier.
bags.
Yeah.
You know, so that they could. He literally could have just had it. As weird as it sounds, he could have had it in his pocket.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, you know, needed something to, you know, to hold the cash together and just used it.
Yeah.
I don't think you could really, you know,
It's pretty
seal his conviction on
reasonable.
that.
Like,
Yeah. So the third suspect is a gentleman called Michael.
but not Rocket Michael.
Well, nobody knows what his last name is. All they know is that he lived in Chelsea, but that's it. Nobody knows anything
London,
about...
Chelsea. Is there a Chelsea?
No,
in...
no, there's a Chelsea in New York as well.
Oh,
I
okay.
think, yeah. However, it's also worth noting that Rocket's real name was Michael Mora.
Oh, okay. So maybe suspect 2 and suspect 3 are the same person.
Maybe.
But who's then saying Michael was there and then
Don't know.
Rocket's there? Like, is Rocket saying Michael was there, but he's Michael? Oh my god.
I don't know.
That's conspiracy theory shit.
So the last one I've actually got is Nancy herself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So she was suicidal.
Yeah.
And she had actually attempted suicide on several occasions, not including when she fake slit her wrist to get
Get
Sid's
attention.
Yeah, and she had declared specifically to her mother that she would be dead before she was 21. She didn't want to grow old, and she had no intentions of living for very long. It's also reported that she actually stuck a wire clothes hanger into her own vagina and punctured her uterus because she falsely believed she was pregnant.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, so it could be argued that stabbing yourself seems pretty tame. But here's the thing, right? If you're going to commit suicide,
Why would you stab yourself in the stomach?
why? Yeah,
That seems that seems attention grabbing again. If we're gonna say she did it, she stabs herself in the stomach and then flops on him, and it's like, oh, I hope maybe the blood will wake him up and he'll take me to the hospital or whatever. But then he's taken 30
yeah.
of these sleeping
She
tablets,
knew that as well.
and he's not waking up.
Yeah. So I don't think that is the case at all.
Yeah.
Because that just seems like a silly way to go. You know, she was surrounded by drugs. She could have slit her wrist.
Yeah, she could have easily just overdosed.
Yeah, poisoned herself, that kind of thing, or hung herself. I mean, I don't know too much.
Stomach wound seems like a lot of it's you're gonna be in bed for several days, and you're in hospital, and then people are gonna be like psychiatric assessments and things, and it's not like they're just gonna go, all right, sign you up, see you later, Nance.
And I think I also read that someone said, is it possible that she rolled onto the knife? But then I again think,
how again?
How I mean, again, I'm not a forensic scientist, I'm not a criminologist, but if the knife is lying flat on the bed, which it would have to be, because
it's not got a balancing act.
Yeah, how would her rolling onto it cause the knife to then sit up
and
stab her?
Yeah.
And then why would she pull it out?
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like,
and why wouldn't she then call for help?
Yeah,
because the phone was there. The phone was working, because it looks like Sid was actually the one that made those phone calls.
Yeah, and it's just too much to assume that one person's going to do that. Like, women don't generally stab themselves, so they're going to kill themselves.
No. Needless to say, the NYP didn't actually put a whole lot of effort into investigating her murder.
It doesn't sound like they did.
No, it does actually stand as unsolved at the moment. However, Sid was charged with second-degree murder. He was bailed.
By his mum?
Don't know.
Oh, okay.
In the months following that, though, Sid attempted to commit suicide twice. Once on the 22nd of October, and once whilst in the Bellevue Hospital, where he tried to jump from a window, declaring that he wanted to be with his Nancy. Ultimately, he was arrested again on the 9th of December 1978, and this was due and sent to Rikers Island following him attacking Patti Smith's brother, Todd Smith. Todd Smith.
Not Todd Smith. You've got to have some balls to attack Patti Smith's brother. Like, for one of the 4 women of the punk scene, like rock and roll. All right, Sid, you do you, but probably don't do you, because that's not going to end well.
Well, it doesn't, does it?
No.
So he's basically forced into a 55-day detoxification. It is dry turkey, so yeah, it's painful, it's horrible. He is finally released on the 1st of February 1979 after posting bail. Now, from what I know about this, is that the reason it was that is because it took so long for Malcolm McLaren and the band to build up the bail, which I think was set at $250,000.
But why was the band still bailing him out? They weren't
his friends.
Yeah, but like
I think they had to ask the record company to help them out as well.
Oh my god! Like, it's horrible as it sounds. They never went to see him in hospital when he got hepatitis. Why are you bailing him out of prison? It doesn't seem like you're that close. Even
I don't know. Because you would think that him and John would be pretty tight.
I suppose it would be interesting to know what John's...
I know, and the thing is he has talked about it, John, in his own biography, and, afterwards and that kind of thing. But I'm not here to judge their actions on, what they chose not to do and what not to do. I'm just here to sort of say this is what happened. What I do know is I believe it was Mick Jagger actually fronted the money for his legal aid as well. Not that many people know that. He keeps it pretty quiet. And it was actually John Lydon that said it, and said I don't know why he doesn't want to talk about it, but, he helped
Maybe he feels slightly responsible because he's like, if he'd have just stayed in, maybe he'd be here still. People... you think you're doing the right thing, and then something happens and you're like, well, if I had just done this or I had just done that.
Yeah. So, as I said, he posted bail and that evening a small group of friends gathered with Sid and his now girlfriend Michelle Robinson at her apartment.
So he got another girlfriend.
Yeah, he got another girlfriend. I don't know how long they were actually together for. There's not really a lot about Michelle Robinson. She eerily looks a lot like Nancy.
Oh.
But she had very short, dark, like black curly hair. I believe there was something saying that she was the sister of a musician whose name I don't recall. But as I said, there's nothing on her really. She's not famous for anything that I can find. You know, I don't even know if she's alive or if she's dead. This is the one time that her name sort of comes up in the media and the public eye. And then she sort of disappears into obscurity. So obviously the gathering was to celebrate Sid being released from prison. He was actually currently on a detoxification methadone program. So he was getting methadone again. He'd been clean for 55 odd days or whatever. However, Sid sent his friend out to get him heroin. And that night, Sid overdosed and died.
Oh, wow.
Next to his girlfriend in bed.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So he was actually discovered by his mother in the morning, but there is actually reports that it wasn't Sid's friend's drugs that killed him. It was actually something that Anne had given him. Now, by this time, she was going by Anne Beverly. And I think she actually confesses to this herself. So Anne Beverly is reported to have told a journalist, Alan G. Parker, that after Vicious had overdosed the first time at the party, Sid had insisted on taking another hit. So he'd already overdosed one time at the party.
Oh, wow.
And I think they'd sent him to bed because he'd had too much.
Yeah, and that's responsible.
Yeah, and Anne had purposely administered a lethal dose of heroin to him.
Oh my! Why?
Well, she goes to say that she says not long after his death that apparently Nancy and Sid had made this suicide pact, and she'd actually discovered his suicide note in his famous leather jacket, but after the death. So I think in a way she thought that she was doing him a favour.
No, Mum, you were not doing him a favour. What you should have done was get him some help.
Yeah, well...
In hindsight, yeah.
Yeah. Sid was cremated at Garden State Crematorium in New Jersey. And there's actually reports saying that a large number of crematoriums refused to actually take his body.
Why?
I don't know. I think it was because of his reputation and that kind of thing. But eventually they did.
It's not going to explode into a pile of dust. It's not actually made of heroin.
Yeah.
Like you touch him and he goes. Poof.
Yeah. And suddenly everybody is addicted to heroin.
Yeah, everyone's like, oh, what's that in my eye?
Yeah, oh,
what's
God,
this gritty stuff on my teeth? I'm not sure that's how you take heroin. I don't know.
I don't care. So Sid had actually stated that he wanted to be buried with Nancy. By now she had actually been laid to rest in a Jewish cemetery in Pennsylvania. So that made it a little bit difficult because he wasn't from a Jewish background.
She was, yeah.
And it's not really heard of where couples who are from two different religions are buried together, especially in a Jewish cemetery.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but Anne had actually taken the trip to Philadelphia to ask Nancy's family if she could scatter Sid's ashes on Nancy's grave. But Beverly, who was Nancy's mother, declined.
Fuck you, Beverly. Yeah. I'm very against this relationship, but also fuck you, Beverly.
Yeah.
You spoilt brat.
Yeah, considering the fact that, she wasn't really trying to stop her daughter from doing this by the sounds of it.
Oh, no. This is the man that killed my daughter. Therefore, they cannot be together.
But there's no proof that he killed her. I mean, if you were to... Yeah.
I have a lot of emotions. I'm very conflicted about what I'm feeling.
So... There is a rumour, though, that she, after the refusal, Anne actually did just go to the cemetery and scatter his ashes.
Yeah, she's just asking. She's going to do what she wants.
Yeah. Well, it was that's how it kind of worked, really. So, yeah, that's the overall story of Sid Nancy. Now, I mean, for me, obviously, this, everybody is always going to rack their brains about what really happened in room 100 of the Chelsea Hotel that fateful night. And... I could actually plausibly see that someone stabbed her. Perhaps this Rocket Red Glare, perhaps somebody else.
Michael,
or somebody else who knew about all that cash, knew what.
Yeah, she could have been in an argument with someone and they've just gone,
Yeah, I mean, they could have been
And
fighting. He
no,
could have,
he's knocked out.
yeah, stabbed her, pulled the knife out. She's fallen onto Sid, and that's how he's
Yeah.
ended up with the blood on him. And whether the person who stabbed her moved her into the bathroom or she made her own way there, I don't know.
Yeah, you're never gonna know
Yeah,
unless you've seen that crime scene.
yeah. The fact that there's evidences suggest that he didn't take those, he took those drugs, he took those sleeping pills or the sedatives or whatever they were, and people saw him do it. And also the fact that if you're going to commit suicide, why stab yourself in the stomach? For me, rules out those two options, that Sid did it and she did it. I just don't see it. I don't personally, but
I can kind of see it maybe if she was doing it for attention, but again, it's too over complicated just for someone to getting attention. It's just too much.
yeah,
That's mental.
yeah, it's really sad. So, but yeah, that's their story. Loads of places where I got sources from, so the usual Wikipedia, medium.com. Also, there's history. Which one have I got here? Kidshi, Ross Journey, WordPress. I'm sorry if I've said that wrong. Chrissy Hines' own book, Reckless: My Life as the Pretender. Joe Summerlid for The Independent did a really good article. Far Out magazine and I Don't Want to Live This Life by Deborah Spungen.
It's nice how Nancy's mum made more money off of her if she died.
Yeah.
Sorry, I am really bitter about that. But that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. How that happened in such a short span of time, to spiral that much out of control, and those things happen. And at no point did anyone go, "Oh, we gotta get these kids some help."
Yeah, doesn't seem like it.
No.
At least from what I've read and seen. That even people interviewing them didn't seem to want to actually reach out to them and give them help.
Yeah.
As I said, there is actually, a photo of him shooting up. There's that interview that
It's like a gimmick. They're these gimmicky kids who are taking drugs in front of you and they don't give a shit. But oh, look how hardcore and punk rock this is, and it's like someone's getting really hurt here.
Yeah. But we see it time and time again, don't we? I mean, like the crack epidemic.
Yeah, the opioid epidemic.
yeah.
Well, crack epidemic's a perfect example of they don't care until it's affecting them personally.
Yeah. So yeah. As I said, there's a lot that's covered in that. What I would say is that, if you know somebody or yourself, are troubled by drugs, maybe in a troubled relationship, maybe you have mental health worries, to get help. I think people paint the doctors in a bad light and saying they won't give you the help that you need.
I think they will over here, where it's like, but our mental health services are so strained. There's not enough.
No, and I mean, there's so many reasons for that. Obviously, my personal opinions of funding for the NHS.
Yeah.
But also, right now, we're right in the middle of a pandemic, and the service is being stretched. I mean, you work for them.
Yeah, and it's that thing of it's the people who are probably under these services or were previously under these services because of the way the pandemic's affecting people right now. They're probably experiencing anxiety or depression or a mental health episode that isn't helped because you're isolated from the general community, that you can't, you've basically been told, no, you can't reach out and get this help when you need it the most.
Yeah, and I think also the other thing is also there are some great apps and websites out there.
Yeah.
Depending on where you work as well, you can always get in touch with Canada Life. If your workplace has got sort of life assurance benefits with them. There's those two websites we use, WISA, which I've used on a couple of occasions. Yeah, okay, it's an AI, but they're actually pretty good.
And there's definitely options you can, if you can afford to pay privately, then there are options out there for what you can access, and if you can't, then there are still charity options and so forth, and volunteer options that you can look into. I know Cruise is a good one for if you're going through bereavement. They're an excellent service in the south of the UK. And yeah, just I know it's hard, but if you're suffering or you're struggling, then you just need to speak up. really. I know it's hard. It's not. I don't. When people are like, "Oh, you just need to do this," yeah, that's easy for someone else to say. It's not easy to do.
Yeah. So, what has made you laugh this week?
What's made me laugh this? The amount of chaos I've caused other people. Generally caused a lot of chaos in other people's lives this week, including co-workers, family, friends. Unintentional chaos, but I seemed to be on a bit of a roll of it, so I just went with it, really. That's made me laugh. I haven't seen anything or listened to anything. I mean, not gone out of my way to watch something that's like super funny.
No, I think I'm quite picky when it comes to comedy stuff as well.
Yeah.
I would have to say that some of the stuff the Affirmative Murder Boys do is pretty funny, I think.
That's really the little skits they do.
Yeah.
Just crack me up.
Yes.
Franzel's little theory that there are no bodies buried in cemeteries is one of my favourite conspiracy theories now, of all time. It's right up there with the Andrew WK one. But yeah, I don't know, really.
No, it's been a pretty quiet week.
Has been a quiet week. It's because we don't watch live TV either, so we haven't seen anything.
No.
And I'm rubbish on social media.
Yeah, I've not really been on social media that much. I think I go on like Instagram just to see my friends' like story about the cat. You know, will one day kidnap if I can.
You can't kidnap the cat when I live here.
I know, that's a shame.
Because I'm a snuffle face.
What if we kept telling you that it's a panda, not a cat?
I'm gonna know it's a cat because I'll have an allergic reaction. Like, why am I sneezing and covered in hives?
Well, I haven't had anything that's like kind of made myself laugh except for a couple of those
meme
things that I sent you. But I would have to say something that's kind of cheered me up this week is gingerbread latte.
Oh yeah.
I've had 2 of them this week.
Oh,
and both of them have been Ventis as well from Starbucks.
Yeah, you've been very emotional about those coffees.
I do. I don't know why. I didn't think I'd like them when I first got them. I was going to be brave because I've never tried them before.
I was going to say, what? And then I was like, no, you haven't.
No, I haven't. Yeah, and then I got them and now I'm slightly obsessed with them. So when, they stop having gingerbread syrup, I'm probably going to...
Go back to an Americano.
Yeah, and it's just not going to be
It's not going to be the same. I'll try and get my toffee nut latte until like June next year.
Yeah. And also, hemp seed pizza base.
Oh my god, yes.
I mean, I could talk about the fact that those 2 pizzas that we had from a local restaurant called
Purizza.
I
think they're a chain.
I'm not a big pizza fan.
No, I'm definitely not a big pizza fan.
And if I'm going to have pizza, I generally tend to go for the greasiest, most disgusting option I can.
Wow.
That's why I'm such a lover of the pepperoni.
Oh. I quite like the Domino's, the Greek ones.
Oh, no, you mean Papa John's?
Papa John's, sorry.
But having obviously done a month of being vegetarian, I
have new appreciation for vegan pepperoni.
Jackfruit pepperoni, it's really tasty. And that the 2 pizzas we had were really good.
They were really good.
So yeah, I think that's it really.
Yeah, I mean, have you got anything else?
No, not for now.
Not for now.
I guess, as I said before, please give us feedback.
Rate and review.
Rate, review, subscribe.
Please don't subscribe. I don't know what that is. Subscribe.
Yeah, we have Instagram, we have Twitter, we have a Gmail. Not sure how I feel about Facebook because I've heard a lot of them have been blowing up.
Yeah, I'm not ready to moderate a community.
Yeah. And we don't have a website because we're cheap. But yeah, please feel free to get in touch with us and let us know your thoughts about
how the show is.
Yeah, and we will catch you on the flip side.
Yeah, be good to each other.
Love you.
Love you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.